Yeah, ready? Yes. Calling the board meeting for Snoqualmie Valley School District on October the 10th, 2024. Would you join me in the Pledge of Allegiance?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Right. Present are four board members. Board member Johnson is unable to attend today. All right, moving on to item number 1.02, approval of the agenda. Is there a motion?
So moved.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Right, motion passes. And moving on to item number 1.03, approval of the minutes of the September 26th, 2024 regular board meeting. Motion? So moved.
Second.
Any comments? None? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, passes unanimously. Next is item number 1.04, communication and recognition. Thank you.
So want to recognize a few things this month. October is National Bullying Prevention Month. And this month in the SBSD, we reaffirm our commitment to create a safe and supportive environment for all of our students by promoting kindness and preventing bullying in our schools. It is also Disability History and Awareness Month, and we want to celebrate the contributions of individuals with disabilities and recognize the importance of fostering an inclusive community that values diversity and empowers all students to thrive. On October 2nd is National Custodian Day, and we acknowledge the hard work and dedication our custodians give us and our students and ensure our schools are a safe, clean environment for learning. October 14th is Indigenous Peoples Day. We honor and celebrate the rich history and culture of Indigenous peoples and recognize their significant contributions. And that's it for this evening.
All right, thank you. The next item is public comment. We do not have anybody sign up for public comment, or neither did we receive any public comments. The next item is approval of consent agenda. Before we proceed, as our practice, we share the contribution to the district. There are two contributions. One is to Falls City Elementary, a donation of $5,000 for workroom supplies provided by Falls City Elementary School PTSA. The second one is for to North Bend Elementary, a donation of $10,000 for the Ashley Hale Art Program provided by North Bend Elementary PTA. We greatly appreciate the contributions. Now moving on to, is there a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved.
Second. Any comments? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes unanimously. Thank you. Moving on to item number 4.01. Two Rivers Parents Partner Partnerships.
And we're going to invite Executive Director Zier up to give a little bit of context before we Catherine gets started.
Okay,
So just before, it is very quick, but before we introduce when we look at like the strategic plan, and I know that we presented at the last board meeting around our school district data. The initial questions are always like, okay, so now what? What are we gonna do about all of that? And that's the great series of school improvement plans you're about to start with, Catherine being so lovely to kick us off. But part of the conversation that goes along with that is like, okay, what are we focusing on professional development wise to get there, to move that needle? And we just thought it would be helpful to share, and a detailed kind of visuals are going to go out in Friday's update with this information. But it's kind of sometimes a surprising when people hear what limited time we actually get to work with the teachers. It's under 40 hours for the school year, and that's in a good year. And our years vary a little bit from year to year, depending on what required trainings we're given from OSPI or, what is coming down the way. So, we're going to have to move from Skyward to a new platform, Cumulative. Whenever we get close to that, that's going to suck up a lot of those hours, right? So this is a light year. This was a 24-25 was a light year, and we're still under 40 hours of total time with our teachers to do that professional development, move the needle. And the bulk of that is packed into August and to our October non-student day. So we have less than 14 left, and you're just now hearing our school improvement plans, and they're just now getting wrapped up in our buildings for the rest of this school year to move that needle. So I think it's just helpful for the conversation, especially given right off the tail of our last data presentation. And so you'll get to see all the details in the update. But with that, I'm excited to really start digging in and hearing from all of our schools, but with a couple tonight. And so I'm going to hand it over to Catherine to get us started with Two Rivers and PPP.
All right. Thank you, Andrea. And the new format with myself on the screen is awesome. So we're going to talk about both the Two Rivers and the Parent Partnership Program strategic plan. And what's interesting is I think I presented pretty late in the year last year. And so a lot of this is a little bit, thank you. A lot of this is a little bit of a continuation of the presentation that I did in the spring, because we were already making plans for this year by the time I was making, by the time I did the spring presentation. So we'll start with Parent Partnership Program. And the funny thing is that Andrea says we have 40 hours. My staff, you can't stop them from meeting. They meet on teacher directed days. They just love to meet. So I actually get kind of some bonus hours as well. But we'll start with the Parent Partnership Program. And we'll go through the data, of course, but we'll go a little bit quickly because am I in charge of this? Okay. So the first part is just how our strategic plan connects with our SIP. And the beautiful thing is that, the overarching goals about preparing our students for the future and having a culture of well-being and belonging is really what we're doing at all times. So I pulled out some specific things that our SIP plan addresses, but really we're looking at that future ready and culture of well-being and belonging. And we started focusing on belonging, I believe, at the beginning of last year at both schools. So it just fed really nicely into this year's SIP. When we look at data at P3, and after making this, of course, I was practicing and wished I had done slides in a different order. So as I talk, I'll probably do that a little bit. When we look at the language arts proficiency trend for all students grades 3 through 5, overall, there's a upward trend with a little bit of a blip in 5th grade. A couple slides down the pike, you'll see the 5th grade cohort data is not quite as bad as it looks under. So if you look at the 5th grader scores in 4th grade, it's not as alarming as this initially was for our team. But overall, we've had an upward trajectory for elementary language arts scores. Our secondary scores are a little bit more all over the map, but again, the cohort data is not quite as alarming as looking at this data. Although our 8th grade, we have a little bit of a blip in our 8th grade group. And I really like data. And sometimes it's hard for me because our end value is so small that it's tough to make really big conclusions when I look at specific students. So we really target specific students and how we can individualize for specific students when we're doing this. And I'm not going to go a few slides forward, sorry. So here's our cohort data that I said I would share. So our cohort data in the 2 groups are 5th graders. They did go down, but not as much as it showed in the slide before. And then our 8th graders actually stayed stagnant across the years. It was just kind of a unique group of students, but always looking at those individual students and how they're doing. I'm going to go back to math, sorry. So when you look at math, interestingly, we really feel that our elementary math is a hot bed where we have not nailed it yet. I think I've talked about that in the past. where when kids are here 2 days a week, how do we teach math? And we are in this would be year 2 of trying something new, where if you come to our math class, we expect you to do those lessons on the days that you're not there. And we have not found a perfect solution. When we look at students who took math with us versus students who did not take math with us, we don't see a significant correlation in test scores. So we are open to suggestions, but we're still really working on how to make our elementary math program more cohesive. Interesting, the scores look great, but I don't actually think it tells the whole story. So we are still working I would say that's one of our biggest challenges right now is our elementary math. Secondary math is another one where we made changes last year that I'm hoping, it always takes a year or two to really see the results of your changes. And so some of the grade, it's a little bit all over, but we're trying to do more math instruction. Historically, it's all been online, and we're trying to do more actual teaching of the math. And also implement more interventions for math.
So when you
That-
say actual teaching, it
Well,
is a
so-
PPP, so how does that work?
Yeah, so historically they've used an online math program, and it was basically like study hall, and then the teacher, for lack of a better term, would go around and help the students teach, or students on specific problems, but the kids would be all over the map on where they were working. And so now she's doing a lot of problem solving and taking a standard and really digging down on that standard during the class time. So it's not just like a study hall class. And she started that last year, and I'm hoping, it usually takes a year or two to see change from that. Interestingly, our 10th graders, I believe we only had 2 in-person 10th graders last year. So the rest were online. And I think it goes to show that really online math is probably not the best way for a lot of students to learn math. So trying to figure out some supports. We're doing a lot more in-person supports for our online students to try to figure out something for our 10th graders, because we're worried about them.
Also, there is another challenge, that how much time of teaching you get, in-person oversight or support that you get in this program.
We're hoping that if we increase that our math scores will go up for sure. Our in-person 6th, 7th, and 8th are more in-person, and we're not seeing that same decline overall. Especially I'll go over to cohort scores next. So cohort scores again, in 7th grade, you can just really see the students have made huge gains. 8th grade, we also saw that slight dip. And then 10th grade, again, our N value, we have 2 in-person students, so the N value is really small, but the rest were online. So we had more than 2 tests, but yeah, and math is challenging 2 days a week. I think that's what we're finding, and we're trying lots of different things, but we also have lots of room to grow in our math intervention model. So our goal is to beef up our math intervention model and then incorporate that with some of our online students.
These things we get in elementary, and then what else in middle and high school?
So they use Alex, which is an online math curriculum. That's pretty, the kids can just go through self-paced, and the teacher can modify. And one of our questions is, we also have Edgenuity in the district, and would it be better to go to Edgenuity, and or maybe it's worse, right? Maybe the high schoolers should go to Alex. So we're really trying to dig into our math as well. And then how do you support kids when they're never actually in person is really challenging too. So this year we've got in-person time 4 days a week, both at Snoqualmie Middle School and then also at Panorama Apartments. They have a beautiful conference room up on the ridge. And we're having, ton of more students because we didn't have in-person sessions here, but we typically have a few students who are coming, and we're trying to beef that up and encourage them. Yeah.
What is that? You're doing what at Panorama?
So we provide in person, we'll staff it with 2 teachers, 1 time a week for 4 hours. So that students who live on the ridge and transportation is the barrier to getting support, they can go to Panorama Apartments. They have a beautiful conference room, and our teachers can support them on anything they need in their learning.
Oh, neat. Okay. That's awesome.
That was new this year. On science, 11th graders are all online students, and the hardest piece for them is to get them into test. I think our testing percentage for 11th grade was pretty abysmal. But our 5th and our 8th grade science scores certainly have room for improvement. We don't actually teach much science in the elementary because they're only there 2 days a week. And so to try and get English and math and specialists and social studies and all of that, we don't do a ton of science teaching. So figuring out how we can support that learning at home would be our goal there.
So here is my fundamental question about a PPP program, right? Because it is a parent-supported program. And if their children are not, or are doing well, fantastic. If they're not doing well, how do you support the parents so that they can be the, right support so that they can, because it's a joint partnership. It's not just your.
Yeah, and it's a lot of things. I think it's super individualized, right? But like in language arts, we might be sending home whatever they're struggling with, extra work for that. Same with math, or we're asking them to come in for extra support. We have a version of Win math reading where they're coming in after school because we're not bound by the school day either. And we're working on figuring that out for math. We did a version of Win Math last year with some success. Some of the students who needed the most, we weren't able to get in, but so we're trying to do supports like that, or providing giving them suggestions on curriculum if they seem to really be struggling, like what curriculum are you using at home? But it's definitely a conversation, and then ultimately having a conversation with some families, like, is this model working for you? Because it's great for a lot of families, but it's not perfect for everybody. So
Do you have, along those same lines, do you have coaching of parents, showing them how to read with their student in a way that is productive for the age group that they're in, or anything like that, where you're coaching parents on how to support their own kids at home?
we do, and we send home, we could always do more, but we do, and we do that, and we also send home materials for them, especially in math, a lot to support the Eureka. It's like, this is what you should be doing. These are the things, or with 95% phonics, they have kind of scripted lessons that we'll send home to support families as well. So it's a little bit different for every student, but we tried pretty hard. We went through our cohort. So some successes that we found is that 3 through 6, we really saw a lot of growth, some huge growth. But then there's, the other one that I thought was really cool is the percentage of our students with an IEP that are, and we haven't historically served students with an IEP well at P3, but we've been really working with Kim to provide that support. And our students with an IEP meeting proficiency on the ELA SPA outperform students with an IEP district-wide by 13%. So I thought that was interesting. And one of the thoughts I had around that is a lot of our parents will, if they see their kids really struggling with reading, they really want to provide that intensive support, which they can't do at 5-day-a-week school. So they'll choose parent partnership for a little bit to try and boost that reading. And I thought that was a cool data point. But overall upward trend in ELA. Opportunities are math. I already talked about that a lot. And then trying to figure out some of those bubbles in ELA, if there was something that we can do to prevent some decrease in a couple of the groups. And then our online students underperform students who are enrolled in person. So those were kind of the places that we're focusing most of our attention. Our goals are pretty standard. We just want to increase language arts and math scores across all grade levels by at least 3%. And then this year, for the first year, we're doing the Sabers for social emotional. And then at the secondary level, we have a self-created sort of the Warren's assessment that we are giving students 3 times per year to develop groups. We've partnered with Friends of Youth to have a therapist on site who can actually do groups, which is pretty cool. So questions about P3? Oh, wait, my PD and support plan, sorry. The last one is just refining some interventions. We've been kind of playing around with language arts and math interventions and really refining those in middle school, or sorry, in elementary school, and then really developing those increased or more intensive interventions for our middle and high schools. We're definitely focusing on universal design for learning. And I think in our personalized approach, it's even more important because every kid has such a personalized education. And then focusing on SEL lessons and keeping the community really strong. So are there questions about P3? All right. So we'll move on to Two Rivers. Oh, yep.
You are working with Kim on IEP supports, 504s.
Mhm.
Do these students go through HiCap identification process?
Yep, so we're getting the COGAT on the 22nd. So we do the first and it's identical to the rest of the district. We give it at the screener at first and third, and then students can be nominated at the other levels.
And is there any way you could actually send us, like, how many people are in each cohort? I know it's a small number, but I mean, I don't want it to take 1,000,000 hours to figure out, but I'm just like curious how many kids we're talking about in each group.
Sure, at elementary, it's about, K1 is a little smaller, so they're not there, but once you hit third grade, it's about 15 to 16 per cohort. 7, 8, 9 is between 10 and 15 per cohort. And then high school, we have this year we're full at like 15, 16 at the high school cohort. And then we have about, right now, I bet we have about 80 online students. And most of those are high school. There may be 10 or less that are middle school and elementary.
So when you say cohort, third has the 15,
Mhm.
fourth has the 15.
Yep.
So about that many, and then maybe online?
Yeah.
Okay.
That's pretty, we have about 200 kids total and about 120 are in person. So it's about 15
Okay.
is a short answer without knowing the exact
No,
numbers.
that's okay. Just your, great. Thank you.
But this data was shared in our previous enrollment and all.
Oh, of course it was.
Yes.
Thank you.
All right. So when we look at Two Rivers, again, cohort data is really small. We have about 15, 16 students per grade level. And we've interestingly seen a downward trend in language arts. And I think I talked about this last year, but one of the things we're focusing on this year in language arts is that really making sure we have really good beginning of the year, middle of the year, and end of the year data, and really focusing on that. Because we're curious about the downward trend. I'll show cohort data in a minute. Our math trend is slowly climbing upwards, and you'll see my goal is a realistic goal, but I sure hope we have been spending so much time in math that my fingers are crossed that maybe we'll see a jump this year. And then our science has been bouncing around. I was disappointed to see a decrease this year, but what they do in science is super cool, and it's the one that we get closest to the district average in, which I hope is because they've been with us one more year and they've had a little bit more time to kind of integrate into our curriculum. So I'll talk, I guess, about math. One of the reasons I'm hopeful that we'll see a jump this year is that historically, if a kid is not able to pass algebra, some of our juniors are taking algebra for their third year and they're just really stuck on algebra. And our math teacher was brilliant this year, but she has a plan for supporting them in algebra while also taking geometry. So historically, I mean, they almost didn't have a chance to pass the test because they hadn't even taken the classes that would allow them to do that. And so I'm hopeful that now that almost all of our sophomores are in geometry, that will really help. And then also using the new curriculum, and if you go into her classroom, it's just this really vibrant place where kids are up and talking about math and getting away from that teacher, I do, you do, we do all the time. So I'm hoping that will really increase our test scores there. And when we go to cohort data, because this is actually the one that I care most about, because I look at the specific kids and I'm like, well, how did you do before? Interestingly, we are exactly flat. And that's disappointing. And yet it helps me feel better about the scores sometimes. But I think that we can personalize and get more of our kids to pass the test. So did you have a question? Okay, so when we look at how we are going to do that. When we look at our language arts, we didn't have target data results for P3, but we looked at some areas of strength and then areas of opportunity. So we're really focusing, this will come again later, but on making sure that our language arts is pervasive across all subjects. We've been working on that in the last couple of years, but trying to be even more intentional in that, and then making sure we're using the terms that will serve them on the Smarter Balanced assessment, because we focused on claims, evidence, and reasoning, but then you get to the Smarter Balanced and they don't necessarily use those terms. So that was kind of our big focus, is just really getting that language arts pervasive across the curriculum, but also making sure we have really strong beginning of year, middle of year, and end of year data. I have math target data somewhere, I think. Oh, maybe I didn't. I think I updated it. We did have math target data, and math was harder because we had lower scores. But there were some areas that we found that the kids were doing pretty well, and then there were some that were more challenging. And one of them that we identified, I don't remember the exact words, but it was basically like explaining your math reasoning. And we thought that that was a great way to kind of integrate into the language arts, is just really being able to articulate an argument. And then another one was statistics. We were low in statistics. And that was an interesting one for my math teacher, because it's like the easiest one to teach, but some years she doesn't get to it. She's like, well, I can get to that every year. So just making sure that we're hitting all of the standards for students before they take the test. So those were two that stood out for me on where we could focus. I think we had a third one, but I can't remember at the top of my head. So some strengths that we had. And again, I always like looking for some unique data. But we did increase the number of students who took the test, which I think is great. But also students identified as low income, they performed better on the SBA than the overall Two Rivers population, which is kind of unique because traditionally, that's a population that doesn't perform as well. And then students with an IEP in math were within 5% of the total population on both the math and that math and language arts. So again, kind of targeting some of the individual students is really where we focus, because we're such an individualized program. And we are slowly moving the needle in math. So that's my other success. Are there questions around those?
Thank you for sharing what the challenge areas were, though, because that was one of my questions when I was looking through the data, like which topic are we actually really struggling with. So
I can send you my slide, because I did add a slide on math. So I think I already talked about this, but our language arts scores have been steadily decreasing, and it's a head scratcher. So we're going to keep working on that. And really, I think last year we spent all of our time focused on math. And so making sure we do the same thing. We've really increased the opportunities for students to get extra support in math, and maybe at the detriment of language arts. So kind of balancing that focus would be important this year. Another one is that our male students outperformed female students on math by 3 times, which is, as a former math teacher, that always really bothers me. And then the other one that doesn't show up in the data that we shared, but approximately 50% of our students miss over 18 days of the school year, so they're considered chronically absent. We did make some gains last year on 80% or better, but that's still a lot of school to miss. It's like over a month of school, month and a half. But our attendance at the start of this year is incredible. Like, I'm so excited about it. We have these attendance meetings and we get to say, like, I actually don't, like, I have reasons for every absence. Like, it's amazing. So I'm hopeful that we can continue that trend. So.
I was going to ask if you had data on how close they're getting to 18. I saw someone else talking this week about how last week, not that, about how close now they're, instead of being a couple of days under 18, they're a couple of days over 18 because they're actually staying home with sick.
Yeah.
And so I'm wondering how, I'm just curious and not needing an answer right now, how close they're getting.
That was actually one that we want to track more closely,
Yeah.
because we haven't, and And I can run how many days they missed, and some are a lot, but even, you know, you think of 20 days, that's a whole month of school, like a 10th of the school year. And
They, having kids who each are unique, sometimes they use those days as anxiety days, like they just cannot, or what, you know, so I know there's a lot of health issues and family, I mean, so many reasons why.
So
yeah,
18 days are like unexplained or total?
no, 18 days total. So, yeah, and we do track it for unexcused versus excused, but our attendance is looking great for the start of the year. And our working theory is that if they feel good about coming to school, those anxiety days and things like that will go down, or the illnesses that are related to anxiety might go down, and we can increase their attendance, because ultimately that's the biggest predictor of success. Our SIP goals are similar, where we want them to increase by 3% across all top populations. And to get there, we are really focusing on our tiered intervention model. So we're continuing, we spent a ton of time on it on math last year. I'm sure I spoke about all of it, and we have this crazy spreadsheet that we've been creating, and then we're doing that with language arts and attendance as well. Focusing on making literacy pervasive throughout the school, and really increasing the language arts. Let's see. Our teachers are all about universal design for learning. It's the entire program, but there's always room for improvement. So making sure that that it doesn't just look like universal design, that it's still rigorous, and that the kids are really digging deep as they are doing projects, because they do so many projects. We have to make sure that they are honestly going deep. And then this year, we're really also focusing on school-wide behavioral expectations, and not because our behavior, if you're in our school, does not look like behavior, but some of the behaviors is like finding a reason to go to the bathroom, or finding a reason to not be in class, and things like that that are impacting their academics. It's not like office referrals, but how can we keep kids in class and have common expectations and language around that? And then continued focus on student, family, and community engagement, making sure that we're partnering with families when students hit bumps in the road. So that's our biggest goal. And we're going 2 weeks, we're going down to Pacific Lutheran University, because they're willing to honor the automatic admission process for us. So we're going to take some kids down to see if it could be a fit for them. So that's kind of cool too. I think I shared this last year, but we went to Western on a school visit, and we have a student who just started at Western. So it's pretty cool that he was inspired by that visit. So we're hoping to continue to do that. Questions?
Any questions? Student reps?
Awesome, thank you.
Thank you so much. We appreciate it. Right, moving on to our high school.
We want to recognize as well, Principal Hay is at a.
I know that
You have it. Right there. I'll let
Keep my
it-
thunder.
Not gonna steal your thunder. Better be good.
I'm gonna do a dance and like interpret it. I did that already today.
I saw a picture.
Yes. It's on Facebook if you missed it.
My kids came home and raved, but I heard about that assembly for like 10 minutes. It was.
It was a pretty fun day. Awesome. Well, thanks for giving us the opportunity to share our Mount Si High School SIP. So you're going to hear from everyone on the team today. Ms. Hay does send her apologies. She is in Tacoma supporting her grandson with his IEP team and working through that process. So she's very sorry she couldn't be here, but she's here with us. She helped us develop all of this. So as I stated, each one of us is going to share something different about our SIP. And we would love it if you could save your questions until the end, because we're going to do some deep diving on some of our slides. They probably have even been updated since you've seen them. So if possible, please save them till the end, because maybe we'll just answer them with all of our new exciting things we're going to share with you. So Jeff is going to kick us off.
Emily and Grayson, thank you for being here.
and upstaging your administrators. You guys look very grown up and wearing t-shirts, so that's really appreciated. So we're really proud of the work that we have done to our school improvement plan. We worked really hard to make direct connections to a Snoqualmie Valley School District's plan. And so the next two slides help make that connection. So Mount Si, we have 3 SIP goals, 1 in literacy, 1 in math, and 1 in culture of well-being and belonging. They're all connected to Snoqualmie Valley School District's priority 1 goal, which is academically and emotionally supportive environments, with its 3 goals of being future ready, effective classroom systems, and culture of well-being and belonging. So the key components that we have attached our SIP goals to are inclusive practices and universal design for learning, UDL, algebra readiness, comprehensive wellness, culturally responsive practices. And the strategic plan specifically calls out early literacy, but we do have our own literacy goals that addresses ELA focused instruction and MLL, and that's based on our school's identified needs. But we still felt like we needed to kind of do a spin-off of the district strategic key component of early literacy, language, and key developments and components. So the next 2 slides are just graphics of how we have attached each of our SIP to the priority and the goal, and then our action steps. But we will dive deeper into each of our action steps for our SIP goals as we go on.
All right, the next couple slides go over our school level data that was provided to us by the district. And I'm not going to spend a ton of time talking about these because Krista and Bernie are going to dive pretty deep into their analysis of math and ELA. But I will touch briefly on science. And so our goal as a school is to obviously increase our number of students taking the science exam. We know that with the low stakes, or they don't feel it's necessary, they're not always wanting to sit for it. So just encouraging them to take it. We also are working on making sure all of our science courses are aligned with the NGSS standards so that when they do take it, they are prepared to take it. And then this year we made a shift in our science course sequence and that all 10th graders are taking chemistry this year. So they are getting that exposure instead of opting into physical science. And so just making sure that they have the content that is needed when they do sit for the exam in 11th grade, they have that exposure. So this is just our overview of our whole school and then our breakdown of special education and low income. And you'll hear a little bit more about it as well, but we did see growth in our co-taught classes in ELA, math, and in science. So when they had that support teacher, we did see growth in those areas. And then I know for science specifically, I can talk a little bit about low income. Last year, several of our teachers in the science department picked their students who qualified for free and reduced lunch as their focus area for their growth goals. And so it is really great to see that growth on the science exam. And then as far as cohort data, again, Chris and Bernie are going to dive into this a little bit deeper, but just breaking it down across all of our students and then as well as our special ed cohort and our low income. There's Bernie.
We're going to start, obviously, is off on where some of our strengths are with where we lie. So looking at the data there, you can see there is a little slight discrepancy depending on which graph you look at. Top graph shows that in 2024, we scored 89%, meaning that we had 89% of our students meet our seat standard. But on the bottom, shows you if you add up 25 to 65, we're saying 90. So we're just going to round up to 90%. We're good. And that's the data that came to us. So that's what we're rolling with. So 90% of our students met our seat standard. That's a significant growth over last year of 6%. Compared to 23, what you'll see in the categorical data is that the cohort, meaning the same group of students on their 8th grade SBA tests, we had 11% growth between 8th grade and their time when they took it as a sophomore. And also when you look at students who were served with IEP, we had a 20% increase over the previous year as in their cohort, as well as 50% of those students meeting or exceeding standard, which is 11% growth as a cohort. 23% or 20% growth over 2023. And then also students who are categorized as low income, we had a 13% increase with 74% of those students, excuse me, meeting or exceeding standard, and then a 13% growth as a cohort. Obviously, then when we look at our opportunities for growth, we had 10% who did not meet standard. 3% at level 1 and 7% at level 2. We know who those students are based on that data. And when we talk about our action steps, we'll talk about how we're working to target those students in those academic interventions. Obviously, as a 50% in our students served with IEP that met our seed standard, we also had 50% who did not meet it. So we have that data that we're working on as well. And then even with the 74% median student standard with students categorized as low income, 26% did not. So we do have that specific student data that we'll be working from as part of our action steps. When we look at it in specifically broken down into reading and writing, even though we scored extremely high at 9%, the target areas that showed where we were a little deficient, so to speak, in the areas of reading were listed there for you. Target 8 being key details, target 11 being reasoning and evidence, 12 being analysis within or across text, 13 being text structure and language use. But again, that is a low percentage because still we had 90% of our students who met or exceeded standard. When we looked at the target areas in writing, students either get a choice of writing an argumentative or an explanatory essay. And you can see there based on conventions, evidence, elaboration, organization, and purpose, where our students scored in those areas. So again, demonstrating that 90% of them met or exceeded standard on the SBA. When we look at our SAT, which we will be taking next week, we have that plan 9th through 12th grade. Our scores there, what you'll see on the left-hand corner is our seniors from last year, their mean scores, the SVSD students, as well in comparison to the US high schools nationwide. The right, you have the PSAT, the National Merit Scholarship Qualifying Test, where our students scored compared to the US public schools. Again, our students are continuing to show that they outperform the schools across the nation. Similarly, when we look at the 10th grade and also 9th grade, we still are showing all students across the board, 9 through 12, who are outperforming the other schools in the nation as it comes down to SAT and the PSAT. Moving into our AP data, there's our comparison between the 2 years. We had a slight dip between last year's students on the English language AP exam. Again, these are 3 or higher scores. But we did have a substantial increase on our AP Lit scores compared to the previous year. When you look at this even more so, when you compare that with across the nation, our students are significantly outperforming our others. And again, what I think is key to note, which we pointed out last year, not every high school offers, they may not have the same enrollment as what we're seeing. We're seeing an increase in our enrollment every year. And I know as Ms. Price and I talked about a soccer game recently, how do we increase and use our AP potential data to increase more students taking advantage of our AP courses and potentially adding some more AP courses to our course catalog. So that's up and coming in the next few years. When we look at our areas of strength, which we've already identified in the graph, some of the other things that we thought was pretty important to note that in 9th grade, as you saw, we had 72% meet or exceed the benchmark in the PSAT compared to 47% nationwide. 10th grade, 78% meet or exceeded it compared to 56% nationwide. And then our 11th graders, 83% met or exceeded benchmark compared to 61%. What's substantial, I think, if you look at that top data point and the SAT with our seniors last year, 93% met or exceeded benchmark compared to 48% nationwide. Substantial performance by our students. And then again, you saw there our AP performance data in comparison 1 year, a little dip with our English language and composition course. Areas of opportunity, which I touched upon, is how do we capitalize on that AP potential? How do we get more students seeing themselves as being AP students? And then we did have a slight decrease. We were down 40% participation of students who selected American Indian as race identification. And then we were down 16% of participation of students who selected Black as their race identification. So again, how do we take that information? How do we utilize it and try to capitalize on how do we show students they are AP potential? Because the data will say just even the exposure to AP, whether you take the exam or not, being engaged in that class, what you can gather from that class just shows that higher level of success in other courses and preparation for post-high school, primarily college. Our goal for this year similarly is to how do we increase at minimum 3%, being at 90%. Great marker, but how do we bump that up? We know who those students are, but we still have some work to do. How we bump that up is going to be our focus, and that's our focus of 3% increase. A lot of text here on our action steps, so I'll just kind of summarize it for you there. Primarily, what we're focused on is our target-focused instruction. So starting last Monday, we had our LA teachers get together as a group. They looked at our BOY data. So that's the beginning of the year assessment that we do give our students, started looking detailed how well did our students perform 9th through 12th grade. From that, this Friday, they're going to be looking at that as well as our SBA scores identified by individual students at each grade level. So even our current freshmen and current sophomores, our teachers will have their 8th grade SBA data to look at and do that, and start that comparison and seeing where those areas of concern are and how do we close that achievement gap. So that's some of our primary work. From that, they will utilize our release days throughout the year. We have some already identified coming up here on next Monday, even on Monday or Tuesday, I forget which day. We have our 10th grade group that's getting together to start looking at that data primarily and targeting those students. And we'll be doing that throughout the year, as well as utilizing the building directed days to do the data analysis, focus on where we're seeing with our students and their scores SBA, as well as their assessments throughout the year to target where those interventions instructions need to be. Additionally, we have our ML program where we're really focusing on, again, on our students that may have not demonstrated that level of success, and how do we incorporate our strategies, our new MLL teacher and her work with us and honing in on where those students' areas and needs are. On that, I will turn it over to Krista to talk about mathematics.
Do we ask the questions?
Yes.
For sections or?
Do you
or
want?
all of it and-
Well, we were hoping you'd wait till the very end so you'd forget. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah, back on the 2024 ELA SBA scores, you talked about 26% were free and reduced and 50% IEP, that's 76%. Who are the other 13% of kids? And how are we tracking that?
Let me see if I can find that data that you're referencing. Do you know which slide?
No, they weren't covered on the.
Okay. Oh, I'm sorry.
Those are the percentage of
13?
students that aren't meeting standard within that category.
Right, and
not-
yes,
Not overall testing students, so it's 50% of students on IEP did not pass the ELA and 26%
within that group.
within the group. So it's only 50% of all students who attend here who have an IEP, not total of the testers. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does.
Yep.
Thank you.
Thank you for that
Yeah.
clarification.
It went fast.
I just wanted to say congratulations, it sounds like, to the 9th and 10th grade ELA teachers for that increase in those SBA scores from 8th grade to the 10th grade. That it seems like a lot of focus, a lot of hard work.
Yeah, and I would say one of the things that's unique to it, so it doesn't look like it's just 9th and 10th grade teachers, is all those teachers touch one of those 2 grade levels at some point. So when I went back and looked at this year with our teachers that may not be in 9th or 10th grade, it's a small number.
Yeah,
So they're really committed to working together, that partnership, that calibration across the board on all the work that they're doing. So it builds upon each other from year to year.
yes, you're right. Congratulations to all the ELA teachers. But I just really wanted to acknowledge
Yes.
the work that the 9th and 10th grade teachers had done, because those scores seemed like
And I would
such
even
an
say-
increase from 8th grade.
Correct. And I would even say when you look at our PSAT, SAT, and our AP,
Mhm.
which I know brings a lot of value to it as well, especially in this community and what that's telling. We're seeing our students just really outperform
Yeah.
across the board, especially with the SAT, PSAT, because not every high school tests all grade levels.
Right.
So testament and commitment to the district and still investing in that. Yeah. It's problematic because it does create a lot of work for us in the background. This entire building, if you can want to come and see what it looks like, this entire building, every room in this building is being used for that testing. So.
The
Wednesday.
SAT data that you shared nationwide is pretty breathtaking.
Yes.
How well we're performing. I'm just wondering, have you also looked at our region or other schools in our area and compared the data to see how we measure?
We haven't looked at it in comparison to other schools in our region. The data we get is just basically, here's your district, here's your school in comparison to US.
They don't
Excellent.
publish it the way that they do in
Yeah.
OCI for like us to be able to do our regional cohort. We could probably reach out to the districts and they'd probably
Yes.
share it with us.
Right.
Or look at like their board docs and do it. It would just not be as simple as going, you know, so it's, yeah, but we can get there. Contact us. It's out there.
Yeah, I'll look at that.
I would say possibly an answer to it is we just had a meeting with recently with the College Board rep. And she highlighted as well, how well our district does in comparison to our surrounding districts.
Yeah, it's awesome.
Yeah.
Good job.
Thank you.
You bet, thank you.
One question.
Yes, sir.
You have any? Go
Yeah,
ahead.
can okay. So one question I have is that like, is there gonna be any like in-class learning to like raise the ELA scores for the SBAC? Or is that just gonna be like teachers doing stuff like outside of school? Because we do the district writing assessment at like the beginning of 10th grade, but like me and Henry were talking about it, and that's more like a 9th grade assessment, I feel like, because you're not really like getting into the 10th grade curriculum yet. So I was like feeling like what I was wondering is like, is there gonna be like any more like additional things added into like the 10th grade curriculum, like more closer to like the May like test date to be able to like actually like raise those scores? Because I feel like we do like the DWA and then we have the months off or whatever, where we don't really go over that same rubric again.
Correct. So a way to answer that question, two-part. One, yes, the DWA is the 10th grade assessment and preparation. It's primarily designed for the teachers to see where students are at and where they need to hone in on that instruction. Right. So that second part of that, my answer is that point alone. Everything that the teachers are doing throughout the whole year is gauged towards those standards that are going to be assessed on the SBA.
Okay.
So when they do their unit plans, they look at the priority standards, where are students at, where we struggling in, how do we target that within our instruction? How do we have the OIS or classroom-based assessments that they may be using, time writes, cold reads, etc., in preparation for those same standards that will be assessed in the SBA.
Okay.
So it's not necessarily something that's outside as a standalone, it's interweaved within all the work that's supposed to be done throughout the year.
Okay.
Does that help answer that?
Yeah.
All right, perfect. Good question.
I've got a question. So for the SAT data that
Mhm.
you shared, is that just from the in-school SAT taken last October, or is that? Okay, so that does not include any of the SATs taken outside of Mount Si High School?
No, just inside the building. Yep.
Quick question. First of all, I want to actually congratulate you and appreciate and thank you for putting together the team and working together for the outcomes that we see. So when we say meeting the standards versus it's great that we are meeting the standards, and you also showed how many are in level 1 versus 2, and how many are meeting the standards. Is there another thing that we can think about is growth? Because growth is also an important way to look at how our students are growing from 3 to 4 or 2 to 3 and that kind of stuff. So it's a question, open question. I don't have any specific suggestions.
In regards to how we report out the data to show the growth?
Not necessarily report out how we are assessing the growth in the students from different levels.
I think if I could jump in, I think the complexity of measuring individual student growth is that they don't ever take the SBA twice in the same grade level.
Yeah.
So if you're looking at Jessica's growth data, my growth data, the only measures of time I have would be the test I took in 8th grade versus the test I took in 10th grade.
Right.
So if I'm at a level 3 in both the 8th grade assessment and the 10th grade assessment,
Anyway,
it is still growth because I'm still performing at a level 3 on 10th grade standards. But there isn't a way to represent individual student growth on SBA data from a level 2 to level 3 because they don't ever take the same test twice
sure.
in 1 year.
But then the 8 to 10, that's also a measure.
The cohort, yes,
Yeah.
that we showed from 8th to 10th. I know at the middle school a little differently, because when I was principal there, we could look at it from 6 to 7 to 8, because they took it all 3 years. So you could track that cohort, you could dive into it a little bit more. I would say another way to kind of look at that is we try to structure our in-house assessments, like the OIS, to demonstrate, are they making growth there too? That should be lined up with the standards that are going to be tested on the SBA.
Yeah, I don't want to add more work for you because there is plenty of data here. I just wanted to see if there is a perspective to really understand how our students are growing versus, hey, celebrating that all of them have passed, so let's move forward.
Right. I guess another way to kind of look, I just popped in my head as you were talking, another way to potentially look at it, if there's that growth as with the acceleration policy. And so when students come in high school, if they scored a 3 or 4 or 3 or higher on the SBA language arts only, they automatically are placed in the next advanced course. With our sections increasing each year on the amount of that accelerated course, that could be an example of looking at growth as well.
Yep.
Now, again, they can opt out, so that could show it. So there's always factors to it.
Sure.
Yeah. All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
I've got a question, one more question. So there's so much relying on the data from the SBA. And since it's only taken once, I mean, from 8th grade to 10th grade, how can we look at this as at more of using the BOI, the MOI, and the EOI as taking a test on one specific day can skew the data so much. I mean, there's just so much relying on this data. Is there ways to use other data from like other tests to help kind of show more growth, just because I feel like there's just so many factors coming into it that could impact the data.
Yeah, very good question, Henry. I would say partly that is shown through how students are performing in their class. So in our conversations with teachers, when it's not just all based on grades, right? 'Cause grades could be influenced negatively or positively depending on the situation, correct? But we look at that data regularly, through our MTSS. We look at our F data, look at that progress for category groups, just the time, the courses, the departments, everything of that nature. Speaking from ELA alone, we look at not only the OIs, but those classroom-based assessments, right? So that we have built in. The other factor I would say is when we're having that conversation with the teachers, when they're developing their student growth goals, are designed around the groups of students and what they're seeing around their data. So teachers have to set goals based on their student performances that we do track throughout the year. That is part of their, lack of a better word, evaluation, and show them where there's growth too. So we don't try to hone in on one main thing, because we do know assessments are just one snapshot in time. Learning is over a period of time. So how do we capture that growth in multiple ways to see, is there progress, is there growth being made?
Awesome. Thank you.
You bet. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, everybody. I get to talk about math, which is, I enjoy talking about math. I know sometimes the news that we get around math is not super positive. So I enjoy this night because I get to talk about the people that I work with, and I get to point out the positive things that we do have going on in our building. And if anybody wants to leak any of this to the Facebook page, feel free. So to start, I did change some of my graphs, so they're probably going to be kind of new from what you've already looked at. Our SBA data. So there's a lot of stuff here, and I'm going to talk about a little bit of it at a time. Last year, we had a goal for all of our students to improve in their SBA scores, and they did. Overall, as a building, we increased by 5%. This is, I think, the first year that we've gotten close to the same percentage increase as ELA, which is really great. In addition to that, we looked specifically at our geometry students last year and the gap that we had between geometry and Algebra 2 students and their performance on the SBA. So our teachers worked really hard to implement more algebra review, because what we were finding is when we start to dig into geometry, you still use your algebra, but you don't use the whole scope of algebra. So they were really intentional about reviewing before the test, and our geometry kids actually improved by 10%. So they had double the improvement, which was really nice to see, and we're hoping for even more. So overall, they are performing higher on the SBA. If you look at our cohort data, that is where the idea of algebra readiness comes into play. If we only have 60% of our students that show up from 8th grade that are algebra ready, then we have 60% of our students that are demonstrating mastery on the SBA in 10th grade. So we're not having students dip when they're here in our building. We're growing them an appropriate 2-year amount. Our goal now has to be to take those that are in the 40% that don't show up algebra ready, get them algebra ready, and help them grow the same amount as their peers. So that's really like the layer of work that we as a math department and team are looking at, is like, how do we continue to grow all of these students at the rates that we're seeing and intervene on those that are showing up to us not necessarily ready for a variety of reasons. Some target data that we looked at last year, we took our math and science departments and we actually had each of them look at the target data for the math SBA because we thought science was a natural place to also push math work. We have, for the past several years, had everybody in our building, when they wrote their student growth goals, except for the math department, write them around writing and reading standards. So all that growth that we have seen in ELA isn't just our ELA teachers, our 9th and 10th grade ELA teachers, it's social studies teachers, it's CTE teachers, it's everybody in our building. So we looked last year specifically at CTE and science because those are the places that math shows up the most. That is in an actual math classroom. And we asked them to write their goals around math targets instead. So all of the goals that we utilized in that work, actually, we went from below standard to above standard in those areas, which was really great to see. One major area of opportunity that I think we have, and Catherine spoke to this also, is target H, understanding solving equations as a process of reasoning and explaining that reasoning. Our kids can explain their reasoning so well in writing. So how do we generalize that skill to math? Like, how do we get them to do the math and then explain the math with words? Because that's what they're doing in English. They're making a claim and they're defending it and they're able to explain their reasoning. And we just need to be able to get them to do it in math too. So if we could get our building really focused in on that target, I think we could see some pretty phenomenal jumps in our scores. Okay, math, PSAT, and SAT scores are very similar to our ELA math or our ELA, PSAT, and SAT scores. Our students are outperforming their peers nationwide, which is great to see. It's also important to note, and I think Bernie talked about this, we test all of our students. So oftentimes at schools, a PSAT is an opt-in versus just getting to do it because you go to school there. So it's an amazing opportunity that we provide our kids. I think it's definitely worth the amount of money that we put into it, the amount of time. Bernie might not think the amount of time contained when it takes it all on. But our kids are doing really well. And I think that this is a measure outside of the SBA that really truly evaluates, are they college ready? Are they career ready? Are they ready for math beyond high school? And whatever capacity that looks like. Our AP data is also really impressive. Our AP enrollment data has either remained steady or increased over this 1 year period. I don't have the previous data, but I did look at 23 to 24, which is great because I have new teachers in each of those classrooms. So all of the teachers that are in these classrooms, they have only been in that subject matter for 1 year. We had some turnover in our department. We added pre-calculus this year for the first time at the AP level. And so they were all new to those courses and their scores remained really, really high. So their average scores remained as high as they were before that. And they are outperforming their peers worldwide. So AP is represented as global score for math. And we are outperforming in all areas. Oh, this is. So this is their mean scores, and then this is what it looks like in comparison to the nation, which is really impressive. We had 100% of our AP pre-calculus students. Grayson, were you in that group?
No.
No. But I know Henry's sitting in BP calculus, so he's knocking that out of the park already. So 100% of our AP pre-calc students, and that was the first year we offered it. So I know that that team of teachers is super proud of that work. Okay. So our math goal is to continue to see that green arrow. It's kind of a low bar. I have a lot more goals than just this one for our team, but if we could continue to see that green arrow specifically in all of our populations, and unfortunately the test doesn't really measure that for our students that are excelling. I think if we continue to see the same enrollment and the same accelerated pathways and kids enrolling in those courses, that's a testament to our kids that are coming through that have no issues and no problems on the SBA, and they're choosing to take upper level math. There's nothing that says you need to take calculus BC ever. You need 3 years of math in high school, and the majority of our kids are opting in for 4. So that's a really great thing to see. They're also taking other math-based classes that don't necessarily fall under the math department. AP computer science,
robotics, all of those things that have an intense amount of math, they're choosing them at pretty high rates, which is really great. So some of our action steps, I know our assessment system is a hot topic, and I'm going to speak to that over a couple of slides here. We actually have added a third opportunity for students to show mastery this year. So previously we've had 2. We actually have added a third opportunity. So they will take an initial assessment. The assessment directly following that one, they have an opportunity to reassess the standards from the first one and demonstrate knowledge on the new one. And then later in the quarter, they'll have a quarter final, which will assess everything and give them an opportunity to improve their score. Something that the math department does is that they take the highest score no matter what time it happens. So parents will see this year, everything is by standard. So for algebra, geometry, and algebra 2, everything is scored on the standard, and then that standard score has an opportunity to improve over time, but it will never go down. We did this for a couple of reasons. We wanted to give more opportunity for students to demonstrate their learning. We also want them to be not only demonstrating it right after they learn it, but retaining that knowledge and applying things. Math builds on itself. So we want them to keep that base knowledge really strong as they move forward. And hopefully we'll see retention on the SBA as well. We have also gotten rid of the OIs in math. We are using our quarter final as the assessment for a couple of reasons. Our students can attest that they don't take the OIs seriously because the OIs are like, oh, you get a participation point that goes in the grade book, and it's not even that. It's just like a yes, you did, or no, you didn't. And we were having a hard time getting students to take them seriously. So now at quarter final is going to double as yes, the grade, yes, the reassessment, but it's also going to be our benchmark assessment that we look at to measure what Henry was talking about before, or I think it was Grayson actually, of like how many times are they accessing that style of assessment throughout their 9th and 10th grade year before they get to the SBA. Another thing we have done this year is we're asking students to keep up with a learning target tracker. So on their first assessment, they have a little tracker where they keep up with their score for each of the standards. And they actually we're requiring, if they score below an 80, for them to attempt the reassessment. And they get to keep that tracker with them while they're testing, so they know the ones that they need to reassess. And it's just making them think about their scores, looking back at the problems to review, to increase their learning so that they can demonstrate their mastery for the second and third test. Okay, another thing we've done to hit at that algebra readiness, and this is totally experimental, and I won't really have a report for you next year, it'll be the year after. But we have developed an algebra intervention course for our students that have demonstrated they are below standard at the 7th grade level and remained below standard at the 8th grade level. So if they scored a level 1 or 2, they were dual enrolled in their algebra 1 class and then in an algebra intervention class. So it takes the place of an elective course. It is focusing on things like growth mindset. It's extra time to practice, extra access to a math teacher, and we cap enrollment at 20 students for that section. So it's a smaller group of kids. They get more one-on-one intervention and help, and it's in their academic day. So it's not something they have to do that's extra. Like I said, it's experimental. We'll see how it goes. My hope is that it helps them catch up in algebra so that by the time they get to geometry, they're entering with the same foundational algebra skill as their peers. And so they can get that same amount of growth in the geometry year. And that should hopefully help increase that cohort score that we see. So if they're coming in, if we have 60% of them coming in, algebra ready, hopefully we'll see that jump from 60 to a higher percentage by 10th grade. Interventions for struggling students. Our math teachers are really intentional about inviting students for Check and Connect. I think we have this big spreadsheet where we track where kids go during Check and Connect every Thursday. And math teachers are pretty consistently at the top of the list. Their classrooms are busting at the seams with kids that are there to get extra help. We've also are starting to work on, and this again is a multi-year project, but just some common departmental tier 2 interventions. So when we have our common assessments and we see that kids are behind, how are we intervening in real time in the classroom before it's too late? So getting to them early and often so that we can intervene on the things that they're not getting, so it doesn't have a domino effect later on. And then this one is just a personal project. I have a lot of feedback from the math department. We kind of developed it as a group. We would like to get some more like
proactive communication out about our assessment system. You all dedicate your time to sitting here tonight to hearing me talk about math assessment. And hopefully that helps like clarify how it's done. But we would like that to go broader. So hopefully it's going to go out next week in our weekly communication, and we'll be ready for Connor to put on all the district communication channels. But I have a video that has just slides that we're going to do a voiceover that explains the whole process. It's got visuals. It's going to have like problem-solving strategies for parents and students to engage in together for like, what do you do when you feel behind in math? What steps should you take? It is not going straight to Ms. Hay or Mr. Schlotfeld. It's like, let's start at the ground layer and do some work and figure out what's really going on before we get there. And then some extra supports that are going to be available to our students. So there are two big ones. Our chemistry team does something called a tutorial. So they have a rotation of chemistry teachers that's available before and after school every single day. They have at least one person here before school every day and one person here after school every day. So no matter what chemistry teacher, you are welcome in their classroom to get support. My team is going to talk about and hopefully work on that tomorrow. And they already offer office hours, but it's like, how do we streamline the time that they have to best support kids so that we have someone available every single day? And then we just got access to this, thank you to the tech team, this amazing program called Math Nation. OSPI has paid for it for all the schools in Washington State, and it is like an extra practice video based, like it does videos of learning modules, and there's extra practice problems, and the access just hit our class link today. So our math teachers are going to get a little bit of information about that over the next couple of weeks, and hopefully we can get it rolled out to our kids. And that's going to be really helpful for some of our student populations that are in their lowest performing, our ML students. It gives it in Spanish, it gives it in all kinds of languages, just more access for students to get access to math and to get it in the way that they can receive it, and have extra help when we need it. So it's just like another tool that will be there. So the communication will have all of that exciting stuff in it, and hopefully a week. It's been on my to-do list since last year, and I'm finally getting it done, which feels good.
Hi.
Yes, ma'am.
You know, that math conversation has been going on, yes, up and down for a while. And so I encourage people to reach out. I've talked to a few parents just this week, and you know, what I'm hearing in each of those stories is kind of multiple components. But when I think about what we could do, like ourselves, like the pain point that they're running into with us that they can't seem to get through is that the math assessment is just the math assessment, and that they don't have other options for how to demonstrate mastery. And so I'm kind of wondering, what are we doing to provide other ways to use that UDO model to provide other ways for them to demonstrate mastery?
Yeah, that will be ultimately part of that tier 2 conversation. Like if we're seeing multiple times over that a kid's not getting it, like how are we engaging with them in a different way and helping them learn in a different way. But math is a very specific thing. They are going to sit in that SBA, and they're going to sit on that SAT, and they are going to have to take a test, and they are going to have to demonstrate their learning. And while they do have multiple opportunities to meet that grad pathway, if the measure that we are all looking at and the measure that we all value is the SBA score, then the thing we have to get good at is assessment. And so I think that do we have students that struggle with assessment? Yes. We also have students that struggle with turning in homework. And doing practice and engaging in the classroom. And so there are some data points in the video that will go out that talk about all of those things. But the first step is to talk with the student's teacher, or the kid to talk with the teacher. And that's
where they all started. Teacher, kid, next step, counselor, next step for some of them not, and parents involved later. So none of them are like, I don't know what to do. I haven't connected with anybody. I haven't expressed that challenge. And so I totally get that for us, SBA is what we want. But what a student needs a grade for is what they know, not what they can improve on an SBA. So I'm just wondering.
Yeah, so the grade, and I'll, again, this is all in the, in what will go out, but as a team of math educators, the math department firmly believes that a grade should represent what a kid knows and is able to do independently. So when we think about other types of assessments, could we expand the type of assessment so it's not, I have to sit down and do this thing? Could it be project-based? Could we incorporate more things like that? Yes, and there's still a need for a student to demonstrate that learning independently. Because at the end of the day, when they leave this building, our hope is that they know how to problem solve. And that problem solve being, I know what to do when I don't know what to do, right? Like, how can they calm themselves to a point where they access their algebra and geometry and algebra 2 toolbox to figure out the answer? And it doesn't have to be algebra, right? It could be any number of things, but it's a skill that will be beneficial to them no matter what they do next. So even if it's not college, even if it is career, being able to walk into a setting where you don't necessarily know what to do and to figure it out and to demonstrate what you do know in a way that is meaningful, I think is the backside of the equation that we don't talk about enough. And I think if we can kind of change the narrative around assessment and kind of calm, not saying that we can completely solve the anxiety, because I get it. I was one of those kids. But like teaching our kids how to manage that feeling so that they can truly demonstrate what they know. And as you know, I talked with our instructional coach today. You can listen to a kid talk about, I don't know what I'm doing. Okay, what do you know? And they'll tell you. And what do you do next? And like, just maybe those little prompts will be the thing that gets them to the point that they can do it, right? So just having those little strategies in our back pocket as teachers, and then saying, you know, and it is a group thing, because the math department is incredibly in alignment with how they do their instruction and how they assess students. They were one of the first ones to get on board with having commonality in their classes, so that every student gets the same experience and they get access to the same level of learning. So they as a team will decide on the things that, like, yes, we're going to implement these strategies, we're going to have these opportunities available for kids, but it's definitely going to be a team decision. It's not something that I would feel comfortable saying you have to do. And I don't think that gives the impression that we value their expertise as educators if we do something like that. So I can tell you they're having those conversations. Those conversations naturally happen with this group of people. They care deeply about kids and they care deeply about their learning. And so they are listening and they hear it and they're working on it.
I'm very glad, because I understand that value of students needing to be able to take a test. Although, you know, I could even argue that that's not something that most people will do as a grown-up. But that aside, when they are in class and they are demonstrating A or A and B level work in all their classes, and that's what they've had in math up until they got here. So, and then now there's a point, so they have an F and they can't get through that test. So I'm glad to hear that those conversations are really happening, looking at alternative ways to legitimately assess people, not just, you know, anything. But to do that.
I'm excited to hear about the communication coming out. And one suggestion I would have is to maybe somehow articulate why it has to be 90%. So I did all the reading, you know, when I first joined the board, and I get the homework piece. I'm totally on board with that. And I'm on board with whatever the experts think is right and what the best practice is. But I think where the parents get hung up is, but why does it have to be 90% of their total grade? Why can they not show the mastery, you know, in class still, because they get the homework piece? And I think if we can find a way to explain that to parents, I think that we'll be able to get more buy-in. I think that's where they get hung up, because that just sounds like such a big piece of the kid's grade, but I'm completely on board. We have to learn to, and it's like, it's a name, right? It's assessment. It's in class showing what you know. And so I think some of it's, we get hung up on the name, you know, just the term. But anyway, I feel if we can find a way to explain that, that would really close some of the gaps for parents.
I just want to add one thing kind of related to both things, which is that, math is one of the, I think, the trickier subjects to embed the UDL practices to, because you're really looking at like very specific math standards. So it is so much easier to look at UDL in a CTE classroom and an ELA classroom, and there are so many ways to demonstrate those standards. Math is trickier. It doesn't mean it's not possible. And so related to the 90%, we're really looking at like, there's so many math standards, and we need to be able to say a grade represents how well they know those standards, right? So that's kind of where that comes from, and that's really good feedback for us to make sure we capture in the video. One thing we are committed to across all 612 schools this year is UDL professional development in our very short 14 hours that we have left. We're doing UDL across the board, and our coaches are helping overlay the target data with math and ELA as a lens. So they're looking at their target data in the particular areas on the SCA while doing UDL to say we can do both. And so I hope that kind of helps a little bit with this too, and we'll see a little bit of movement in that, but it still is going to be the standards. And so they'll start to be able to look at that with us as a specific math team of like, what does that look like in math with our math target data? So, yeah.
And
Thank you.
I guess I'll just throw out one more, like when we have those students whose grades are really low, and especially if we know that that's not consistent with something we've seen in the past or in another area. Maybe that can be part of the conversation, what kind of interventions should we be having there? Because a lot of these students are not necessarily students that need 504s or IEPs or.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct. That's absolutely correct. And that is part, we actually was just working with the instructional coaches today about like rolling out just a general, what is MTSS and what does the classroom level look like? And like a student that is in the lower 5% of your class might not be in the lower 5% of the entire school. So what are we doing in your classroom first before we're bumping them outside your classroom for intervention? I would also say that and this is tricky because I don't want to place blame on anyone else in the district. I think we have an amazing district. My own daughter goes to school in this district. I believe in it 100%. I love the math curriculum at the elementary level. I could go on and on, but when we have 40% of our students coming into our building not algebra ready, that's a big gap, right? And that 40%, I would tell you, a lot of them have had A's and B's in middle school math the entire time. So that's what we're up against, is that like, until we have like a really streamlined way of our grades being predictive and actually demonstrating what kids know and are able to do, our test scores and our grades are never going to be in alignment. I can tell you that at the AP level, our test scores and our grades are incredibly in alignment. So by the time our kids have rolled through our 4 years, and it depends on where they come in, right? Like Henry came in at the level of algebra 2, so he's excelled all the way through. But if you're coming in with, CC 6, 7, and 8 Bs, but you're consistently scoring a level 1 on the SBA, you're not algebra ready by the time you get to high school. And that's not a knock at any teacher in our district. That's just a fact of how does the grade calculate and what is it that the kid is demonstrating that's getting them that A or that B? Is it truly about their knowledge or is it about their compliance, their behavior, their homework completion? Those things should not be the things that we're assigning a grade to if we want our grades to be representative of their knowledge. So the big conversation.
I just really appreciate your passion and your energy around math. I have one student that's on Henry path and one that's in the CC path and can really relate to everything you're saying. Just one thing, I don't know if Power Hour would ever come back, but Check and Connect is so popular with math. Yeah. Do you have any analysis at what the students are coming in or types of questions that could also help influence and like streamline, I guess, some practices?
Yeah, that's something that the reason why I'm kind of pushing this idea of a tutorial so that we have one for our algebra, geometry, algebra 2, and then our upper level math. So my hope is that we get by with 4. sorry, teachers that are out there listening, they haven't decided yet on what this is gonna look like. This is their work for tomorrow afternoon. So I don't want to speak for them yet, but my hope would be that, and that they have consistent access, because when we were able to offer our tutoring last year, we did collect some data around why they were there. And so that was impactful for me. Just, we had kids from all areas of math and they came for various reasons, to review for a test, to ask specific questions, because we assigned them there for detention. Various reasons that they were there, and that was really helpful. But the funding for that was a lot. There was a lot of money went into providing that tutoring, which was a good use of money, I think, but we just don't have that right now. So how can we make do with less and still provide those supports for our students? Is kind of the goal.
I can add that we are discussing some potential for some extra support at the district level. How can we bump some of that up? Also, Christy is working on getting a work session with all of you to discuss grading and the whys and hows, especially at the high school. And hopefully we can get that on as well. As well as our parent piece. And I think that, and I appreciate Krista with the middle school A's and B's. An A point, they're getting the A's and B's and they're now not that. As a parent, I know that that's kind of a blow. So certainly some work we can do at the middle level as well.
I don't want to cut off here. I do want to say, I love the work that you're doing around UBL and MTSS in the classrooms, and dovetailing that with all of these conversations and with instructional coaches. I know that you're putting a lot of thought and a lot of intentionality into moving our grading and our instruction to the place where students will succeed the best. And I am so grateful for that. And I'm so grateful for your very, very thoughtful response when I was asking about that grading difference. Thank you.
I have a couple comments. So this like kind of goes with what everyone else has been saying. I do understand like how assessments are there and like your grade in math is just like completely dependent on the test, because that is like what you know and what you can put down on a piece of paper. But sometimes I feel like it's hard because like I participate in class, like I will go to office hours and like all this stuff, and I'm still getting like F's on like half my assessments. Like if I didn't show up like last year I took algebra 2 and I showed up for the last like 2 months of school every single day after school and just bothered my math teacher like to get extra help. And even then I only like raised it. I mean, it's still impressive that I raised it to a B, but like I feel like for me, like I'm used to having like the A's, and like I feel like there's nothing like that I can do sometimes to be able to raise that up even though I'm trying to. And I feel like that's sometimes hard because then like also like even like the homework is graded as a 0, and I feel like even just making that like a super small category of like 5% would even help like me like encourage myself to actually do the homework, because right now I haven't really done it because there's other classes that I have that has so much more homework in it, but it's actually graded. So it's like I have more, like I feel like I have more responsibility to go and do that because I know there's gonna be a grade put on that. But with the homework that I have for math, like, oh, I could do it the night before or like a week before the test or whatever, because there's nothing like actually like marking me down for not completing it, even though I feel like if it even was counted just a little bit, it would make everyone do it. And I feel like it could allow people to like actually put like more work into math than what a lot of people are doing right now. And I just feel like there's the assessments being like the 90-10 or whatever, and even like the daily work, we don't have a lot of daily work. So I just feel like there's no way to actually like show that you're even like there in class, like trying your best, when all that like I go into assessment and I'll get a 46% on like one of the sections. So I feel like I don't know, that's like more of a comment than a question, but I don't really know.
It's still helpful. I can share.
Yeah.
Make sure the students are part of the work study.
I
I just think that would be good
Yes.
to implement that when we talk about grading, because I think that it's just interesting to have a perspective about this. So. I'm not sorry to make you more, but.
No, it's okay.
You got another one or is?
Can
that
I add
all?
on to that?
Yeah.
Well, and even with the reassessment process of the mastery checks to the assessments to even the quarterfinals, the whole point is to be reassessing what you have been previously tested on. But with the quarterfinal system, it is, yes, it's the same topics, but it is exponentially harder and just a complete, like, I would say, like, multiple steps up from what you were previously tested on. So, my only thing is, well, yes, I was tested on this before and this is my reassessment, but this is 10 times harder. So, I mean, where's the like expectation of where I'm supposed to be when I just thought I was supposed to be retested on what I previously had put in front of me.
And I don't think you didn't experience this in assessment system, like in your lower level classes. You've only experienced it in AP, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you.
A few comments. One is, for me, the third assessment actually added value to it because now you're giving more opportunities to, show your, understanding of the concepts. The algebra intervention course that you talked about, when they get, instead of elective, then you're supporting them. Is it like a semester by semester that they can clear and go, or is it like a whole year by year?
Right now it's for a full year. If we had a student that was like truly excelling, say their SBA score was low for some random outlier reason for 2 years, but then now they're like just crushing algebra, we would probably look at moving them at this semester. Because of our 7th grade day, our kids have, 4 additional credits. And then, yeah, and they typically were giving up like one of their academic electives, like social studies, that while a lot of our kids do take it at the freshman level, that's kind of what they opted to give up.
Definitely looking forward to the proactive communication, how that works out, because I think that'll really, really help parents and the students to understand how the whole department works and what expectations are, and all the support as to how do you navigate different scenarios. That's amazing. Question was, is there a correlation to the performance of the students in the math when they take their the electives in which has some intensive math like robotics or computer science? Is there a correlation to that?
So I think probably, and I think the correlation probably goes the other way. I think our kids that feel comfortable with math and that want to go into those types of classes, it's because they really like math.
Right.
But I think there's probably definitely a connection of some kind. I just don't know which direction it would go, like which would be the cause of the other.
Yeah.
But there's definitely a correlation. I think our students so if you look at our BC calculus class, a lot of those kids are in AP computer science too.
Right. So I'm sure there is a correlation to the top here, right? How about if there is a correlation, then any students who are in the growth mode, if they take the elective that has some kind of intense, not a high intense math, then because they're practicing in other classes versus not necessarily just in the math class, could there be a improvement?
Possible. I mean, we saw that with our science data from last year, the data that our chemistry team specifically focused on with our 10th graders, we scored higher on our SBA. So I think when we give focus to the things that we want to grow in, that's where the growth occurs.
Sure.
I have one more comment, and this is like more like to do with like the SBA like math scores. So like your action step said that when a student's in geometry, they'll review algebra 1, but is that going to happen for like algebra 2 reviewing geometry as well?
I'm so glad you said that, because I forgot a point on that. So we did do last year an intense algebra review right before the test. We've actually worked to spread that across the course of geometry this year, so they're reviewing that algebra a lot more. And that's a great idea for algebra 2. So I will share that with our algebra 2 team.
Because last year I took algebra 2 and I feel like I think we did a little bit of review before it, but it wasn't like extensive. And I just felt like I was kind of thrown into the test. I surprisingly passed the SBA, which I actually almost cried about because I thought I was going to fail. But, and I just feel like there isn't a lot of prep that was like given to us for that. And I think it might be also hard because like my class last year was majority freshmen, even though it wasn't a freshman level class. I just feel like there's like teachers should at least be able to give like resources for us to be able to use to like if people really want to earn that 3 to 4 range, like to be able to use, because I feel like last year I was scrambling to like find resources to use to be able to like reteach myself geometry and even some algebra 1 stuff, because I think there's some things that you learn and you just never go over again, or you just like learn like such a complicated version like on top of it that you forget how to do like the basic level. And I just feel like it would be really beneficial for 10th grade students that are at those higher levels, like even pre-calculus, to be able to look back at everything else besides just the geometry students with algebra 1.
I think it would be helpful for our geometry students because we do have, or our algebra 2 students, because we still have that little bucket that's not scoring, you know, the 20% that's not scoring in the pass rate on the SBA. But our pre-calc, 100% of our students pass. We don't have any pre-calc or calculus students that don't pass the SBA.
I'd just like to say, another takeaway for that, I think we said earlier about ELA, about it's all those teachers. This is a K-12 system, and you shared about middle school grading and those kids that don't come in algebra ready and all these things. So it also is the focus around, we need to focus at elementary and give that some more emphasis. So it doesn't feel like the high school is where the buck stops kind of thing. So I appreciate, Kristen, but this isn't unique to Snoqualmie Valley. Math is, if you're in any district, these conversations are happening around math, also around grading, because districts are shifting their grading practices. It's not the way mom and dad were graded. Everyone has experience in school, or most people have experience in school and how they were graded and expectations around A's and the homework and all those things. That's all learning and will take some time. We need to do a good job of coaching people up and giving them those resources to understand it. In my time here, these are some great steps that you're working on. I appreciate them.
Thank you.
I just want to add one thing. It's just fascinating to me. I think I shared this with you. When I was working at the Glen, I had an opportunity to meet Chris Reichel, and I was asking about why we require Algebra 2, because Algebra 2, and you can speak to this, is particularly a math subject that it changes. Like Algebra 1 and geometry, students can often find themselves like fairly successful, even if math is a more difficult subject. When you go up to Algebra 2, there's something about that level of math that is particularly tricky. And a lot of students aren't going to go into a math-based field. So there's been a lot of advocacy around Algebra 1 geometry and financial algebra being the required math pathway to get a diploma, and Algebra 2 continuing to remain as an option for students who are math-based pathways, as we talk about pathways. And what I found out is that there's lobbying that happens at the state level to keep Algebra 2 as a requirement. So it's heavily political from our college system. So like University of Washington lobbies to remain that, to keep that as a high school graduation requirement, which is also part of the SBA that is tricky for students. So what you think is like school's best intentions to try to support students and do pathways and do UDL options within like the math-based field. It's even beyond our control sometimes of how we can serve students, because to say like, you know, K-8, we have students that are struggling in math all along and they get to us not algebra ready, and we have to get them Algebra 1 geometry and Algebra 2. That is a particular challenge for the high school. So.
And we're also paying attention to the math pathways since we've moved more to the informed self-select, and what impact is that having? Are they foundationally truly ready to make some of those jumps? And why are parents sometimes choosing to have their students make those jumps? Because we believe that there's probably some of that. 40% is that's an issue as well.
I have a lot of data around, at least once they're in 9th grade, how we enroll them in their next level course. That's a topic for another day.
Like you said, you know, we have a lot of questions and we think, you know, but the appreciation and gratitude is there, that the amount of work and the focus you have. So.
Couldn't do it without the teachers and the coaches. They're a big part of it. Thank you.
Jessica, what are you gonna share?
Not much. To be perfectly honest with you, I'm hungry and, so here we go.
Here.
Our SIP goal number 3 is culture of well-being and belonging. So, it's increase inclusivity and equitable learning opportunities in all classrooms through the use of evidence-based tier 1 culturally responsive instructional practices aligned with our students' collective and individual needs. And I challenge anyone to say that 5 times real fast. But we're gonna drill down to the basics of what this actually means. So we want to collect as much data about our students as possible, their academic data, social emotional data, behavioral data. So based on teacher feedback, we have streamlined the student referral form, also in alignment with the changes to the MTSS being a mandatory thing in 2028. Yep. So we have streamlined the student referral form for teacher input, and the data I have that around, the data that I currently have is we have 70 referrals to date compared to 19 at this time last year. So we have changed our format of communication that allows our teachers to engage with it more easily, but still allow us to track the data on student needs, both academically, social, emotionally, and behaviorally. We also have gone with the building-wide cell phone enforcement. And I don't know if any of you guys had an opportunity to come into our classrooms, but you can feel it. You can feel the increased level of engagement without having that piece of distraction. We are proud of the fact that, in a school of almost 2,000 kids, we have only 187 first offenses, 24 second offenses, and 5 students who are on their 3rd offense, meaning that they have some kind of a cell phone contract. But 7 to 8 weeks in, we're really actually proud of our students and the things that they're doing in class to keep their digital devices away and engage in the learning. And like I said, come into any of our classrooms, you can see and feel the difference. We have also increased lunch and supervision hallways. So we're really prioritizing authentic, distraction-free learning environment. So during lunches, we're actually closing the doors to our academic hallways so that our students during lunch are not walking and weaving through all the hallways. So again, really trying to preserve authentic, distraction-free learning environments. We've also really focused on attendance, right? Because if you're not here at school, if you're not engaging in your classes, the learning isn't happening. So we gave our students the first week to get acclimated to the building, get acclimated to their schedule. And starting week 2, we have a 4+ tardy policy. So we track tardies on a weekly basis. That is the effort from Katie Redmond and our security team and Bronwyn McDaniels, but any student that has 4 tardies in that week gets 1 hour of detention. If you have 8 tardies, you get 2 hours of detention, so on and so forth. And so our data related to the tardies is we, starting our 2nd week of school, we gave out 14 detention slips. We are up to 44, but we do have a consistent bunch of, I would call them repeat offenders, right? So these are just habits of habits that they have learned over time that we're really trying to break so that they can engage in the learning in the classrooms. We've also, again, streamlined expectation for grading timeline, trying to be more proactive with the grading, with our families, with our students. And so we are sending out 3-week parent communications that really speak to, this is what your students are engaging in the learning, this is what's coming up, this is their grade, etc. We are also monitoring students' access to Tier 1 academic interventions through the Check and Connect system. The Check and Connect is great because kids can advocate for themselves and say, hey, I really need to go see my Algebra 2 teacher, or teachers themselves can look at their grade book and say, oh gosh, X, Y, and Z students are struggling. I want them to come to me, and or as an MTSS team, as we see that students are on the 3 to 4+ F list and we see them struggling, we are assigning them to a course that they can go to get some more support. So Again, we're tracking how many teachers are engaging in that, how many teachers are inviting kids, how many kids are self-advocating for themselves, as well as how many kids are being referred through the MTSS process. Also, last year we spoke about instructional rounds, and again, with partnership and feedback from our teaching teams, we have taken the instructional rounds up a notch. And so not only is it instructional rounds where they get to observe each other's practice, they also get to partner with the teacher for the duration of the semester. So they get into each other's classrooms more frequently, as well as having reflection weeks with each other where they can collaborate and talk about the wonderful things that are happening in classrooms and how they can transition that into their own practice. So our first teacher observation week starts next week, followed by a reflection week, so on and so forth. We really did challenge and encourage our staff to get out of the comfort zone and maybe partner with the teacher outside of their department, because I think there's so much wealth of instructional strategies outside of your department that you could transition into your department. And so we really did encourage that, and some of our staff are taking the brave steps to do that. So we're really excited to see where that leads us. That leads us to the UDL strategy that we are monitoring. We are working at engagement. We are looking at how to support students with sustaining effort and persistence. And the 4 bullets that you see at the bottom, heightened salience of goals and objectives, varying demand and resources to optimize challenge, foster collaboration community. That is a lot of legalese, but breaking it down, what we want to get to is we want to make the learning and the why of the learning at the forefront of the kids' education. Varying demands and resources to optimize challenge. We wanna like work with all the kids to say, setting high expectations for our students and using flexible tools and supports to assess learning. So that's kind of where Director Price was talking about. Is it just assessment, or could there be other ways to assess learning? Fostering collaboration and community, and that's really learning with each other and learning from each other. And then increase mastery-oriented feedback, which is guiding students' learning by emphasizing the role of effort and the process. I think oftentimes students, parents, community, even myself growing up, were like, the goal is an A. But is the goal really an A, or is the goal to understand the process of learning and to engage with the learning as you go? And so really just giving frequent feedback so that the students can constantly reflect on their learning and grow with every opportunity presented. So those are the 4 subsets of sustaining effort and persistence that we as a school are focused on. And during the teachers' observations, not only are they seeing each other in their practices, but seeing where these 4 things show up in the classrooms. So those are our action steps to culture, well-being, and belonging. Yeah.
So many good things happening. I love that I'm hearing about cell phone non-use and the difference that it's making. Closing off hallways to maintain a certain distinction in spaces and a number of things that I'm hearing all having really positive impact. I'm just wondering how we're making sure that this is creating a positive rather than a compliance and strict, environment. My kids, anytime somebody kind of barks at them in instruction, they feel that and they come, I hear about it because it hurts their feelings and it takes them by surprise. And I know that it can be common for people to deal with teenagers that way. They feel like that's just the way you do. And so I'm just wondering, with all of these new things, how are we making sure that this is still a relational, positive environment for students?
Yeah.
And not simply now there's more rules and now you're gonna be in trouble if you don't follow them.
Yeah. We do still give a lot of control and power to the teachers in their classroom environment. And even though step one of the cell phone policy, for example, is if it's out on your desk, we take it, right? We also give our teachers the latitude to say, hey, Kristen, put your cell phone away. Or, hey, Henry, your earpods have to go, right? Because that is the relational piece. And we are working with developing teenagers. We are working with their brains that are not yet fully formed in their prefrontal cortex to make those positive choices all the time. And so even though the level one is confiscate and it lands in the office, the first time per se, I would say our number of having only 187 students in the first offense is an example of the relationships that our teachers are showing in their classrooms to manage behaviors in their classrooms. So, I mean, I truly think that if it was the first time and no grace, that number would be really high. For a student population of 2,000, it would be really high. But we do really focus on relationships. We do really focus on getting to know your kids. We do focus on engaging with kids with positive intent, right? So, hey, do you need that cell phone right now? Right? Versus like, put it away. And so those are all the strategies, tier one relational instructional strategies that we do encourage with teachers.
I think given student, we are trusting them because many districts, even from the superintendent of state, they're putting them in the bag when they come in. And so it shuts that phone down. So we are giving students that trust that hey, here's when you can use it, here's when you can't. And it's your opportunity to lose that rather than just put it in the bag at the start and you can't touch it, which is most of the districts. What I've seen is that the route.
And I do think that like this is also, something that Krista had referenced earlier is that we don't yet have the data, right? We don't have the academic data. We don't have the behavioral data and or the social emotional data to give weight to the fact that the cell phone policy is working. But I think that data is something to come. Do we have, is our percentages of students who get an F on their transcript, is it decreasing? Are our behavioral violations decreasing? I think we do need a couple of years to see the actual implementation and fidelity and whether it is a positive strategy in a school building.
I also think part of our strategic plan, we mentioned a lot of things we're going to measure as far as sense of belonging and well-being and kind of just the feel of how does it feel to be a student at such school will come from survey data we start to collect annually. And so over time, we can feel like, wow, we make some changes like this. We can look at academic data, we can look at Swiss data, we can look at whatever, but we can't really capture how does it feel that you're developing those questions and then having the annual survey go out and we can measure certain things and we can get target data as a district to say these are some of our pockets and how can we build in some professional development that addresses like how we're talking to students around cell phones or whatever if we need to eventually. So
just real quick, it was interesting to see the list of what you want to work on. One thing or a few things that I really like with what goes on in the high school is a lot of what I've seen hanging, was it last year you had like a wish for the juniors, as their seniors and sophomores up. Those are things to me that set out the belonging piece of how you are inclusive. I think after Parkland, there was Post-it notes around feelings and how you want to treat other people in the high school, right? Those are like kind of the gems that bring people together. And so I get your point of we're kind of pushing something where it's students versus teachers versus how do we all come together and live in a civil society and you don't have group A, group B, group C, group D, you have group one. Just everybody belongs.
So if you like our assembly today was that homecoming assembly was so much about that. Is that a sense of belonging, and how do you create that sense of belonging? And so the ASB as a whole, our student leadership, our leadership classes, that's also been a big focus, is belonging. And again, I think that is kind of the through line from the district to the school to our students, and they're getting a sense of that. So yeah, belonging is like a really big key term for us this year. It is something that, again, the leadership, all the leadership students and the teachers are really pushing forward, and finding ways for students to not only be a part of this community, but also belong in this community.
And I'd like to add on to that, because I'm a part, and so is Grayson, of this leadership team, and that is our whole purpose, and is to create this sense of belonging. And already the positive feedback that we've gotten from the student body of what we're doing, everyone feels more connected and in this more inclusive environment. And I think that the feedback will just continue throughout the year as the things we're doing will just continue. And I feel like this is something that you'll see in our reports further on in the year, but that sense of belonging is growing and will continue throughout the year.
It's also not just a sense of belonging for the students.
Mhm.
Today, if you take a walk through our building right now, the student leaders offered our teacher, well, first of all, it's decorated more than I've ever seen. But the student leaders offered our teachers paper so that they could decorate their doors, and the theme was what we love about Mount Si. And almost every door, it's about students. And we had more teachers participate in our assembly today than I have ever seen. And so that trickle effect of our teachers feeling that sense of belonging, our teachers feeling supported and wanting to be here, the students feel that in turn. It's about everyone in the building feeling that. So it's mostly about the students. We all know that, but there's also that middle layer of the teachers that they make the biggest impact on our kids. So encouraging them to feel that sense of belonging, I think, is powerful for our students as well.
And if you would like, Katie will close out with a redo of her assembly performance of Backstreet Boys today.
Backstreet Boys, I want it that way, in case you missed out. I have the last slide. And everything I was gonna say has already been said. So I'll just do a quick summary. This is our PD plan and how we're gonna accomplish all of this stuff. So as Andrea and Krista shared during the math portion, we've been working with our lit team and our instructional coaches to really get a focus of what MTSS is like in a comprehensive high school. It's not something that's easy to find because it doesn't exist in many places. And so having our big school picture and then honing in on what it is like in the classroom. And just because they're your 5% of kids that are struggling does not mean that they're the highest or the lowest kids that are performing in our school. And so looking at that big picture, what tier 2 and tier 3 strategies in your own classroom can you do on top of what everyone else is already getting? And how can we support that? And so working with our lit team and our instructional coaches to really get that in, and then our instructional rounds. And we're really excited about the reflection piece, so that we heard from our teachers last year that they really missed out on the opportunity to share what they saw in each other's classrooms, and be like, hey, how did you do this strategy? And so they kind of are going in with a focus as to what they want to see with their partner in the week one, and then talk about that reflection. So that is our BD focus for the year.
Can I say one more thing? This is also, you mentioned it a few times, and rightfully so. It's homecoming week. So I want to thank the high school team. And
Be here at 11 p.m. tomorrow night if anybody wants.
so I appreciate that effort to get this work ready for the school.
Thank you.
I talked a lot, and I just want to say one more time, like, thank you. You know, you guys are doing amazing job. It's wonderful to hear it, and it's wonderful to see it impacting students. So,
One last comment, the goal is to get A, but now how is the journey? That's what we are defining. Right? Anyways, thank you so much. All right. Moving on to the next item is, we don't have any review and or action items on the board. And the next one is future meetings. If I look at the calendar here, We have, we have an office hours on 21st. And, next board meeting is on the 24th. And we don't have a, school, no school Veterans Day on the November 11th. And, then the 14th is our next board meeting. And of course, other. All right. Anything for the good of the order?
Yeah, not every school board has student reps in the state. I think tonight is a great reason why everybody should have one.
Yeah.
Your comments were stellar. About both of you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Insightful.
Anything else? If not. Meeting adjourned. Thank you.